And welcome back to another episode of Scoundrels Inc. This week we're talking about The Mandalorian, Season 3, Episode 3, when Bo-Katan accidentally joins a cult. Psych, it's called The Convert, and this one was...
Because she converts into this.
Yeah, she absolutely
cult.
joined a cult.
Yeah, she absolutely joined a cult.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But this one
happens.
I'm looking forward to this discussion because right after this episode, I went to the old Twitter sphere, you know. I was curious what people were going to say, and I got to be... Look, part of it's probably, it's like a 1 a.m. West Coast, 3, 4 a.m. East Coast time. There's not a whole lot of chatter on this one, but then it started to get a little bit of chatter.
Well, Frank, you know why that is.
Why is that?
Because you went to the wrong place to discuss this episode. Everyone knows the best place to discuss this episode is in the Scoundrels Inc. Discord chat right after the episode, where me and our foreign viewers discuss it.
Our what?
I thought you were going to say that Star Wars Hive was the best place to...
What's Hive?
Anyways, speaking of Hive, actually, follow us on our socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We have a lot of clips over there from the show. So if you just tuned in for the first time, you're like, I don't know if I should invest my time.
I don't want to go watch all these episodes. Just go watch the clips. It's where Frank edits them, makes us say different things.
Yeah, maybe we'll win you over. Maybe we won't. But in the meantime, just hit subscribe. And then if you feel like it was a mistake later, then, well, just... Then we'll figure that out.
Well, it's funny because our clips are doing pretty well across social media platforms.
They do from time to time.
However, depending on which platform you're on, we're either alt-right misogynists or way too woke and talk about Grogu's gender. So someone please tell me where we're supposed to land, because look, man, we're just talking about
Star Wars, man.
It's not about politics. Anyways, let's talk about fascism in Star Wars.
Yeah, let's talk.
Have you guys tried the yellow Imperial biscuits, by the way?
I prefer the red ones.
You prefer the red ones. I like the blue ones.
You know what I'd like, Frank? I'd like to get into the episode discussion.
Yeah, me too. You wanna?
The blue ones taste like moof milk, but whatever.
So we start right off in the mines of Mandalore.
And cut. All right. You know what, Frank? If you can roll the intro again.
No, it's already been rolled.
Damn it.
Yeah, I already knew it was gonna roll, which is fun actually for me because you don't know. Like I can tell.
I have a pretty good idea.
I don't think you do. You're gonna have to write it down on a piece of paper.
I mean, I forgot everything we said before this point.
I already know where it's gonna go.
But I remember thinking
happened.
this is probably where Frank's putting the intro.
No. I know exactly where it is.
Hey guys, so we start with a shell-shocked Bo-Katan staring at the waters, the living waters of the mines of Mandalore, and then Din wakes up like, guys, I'm awake. Remember, the show's about me, not her. In fact, what if this show wasn't about me at all today? Bo's like, hey, did you see anything? Did you see any weird creatures?
Yeah, like, hey, you didn't happen to see my my old Barbie collection down there, did you?
Yeah.
You didn't...
I had a dog run away in this room. Weird looking dog, horns, scales,
giant.
You didn't happen to see my old high school yearbook down there, did you? With the very embarrassing photos that I took on Picture Day. But no, she was asking about the mythosaur. The mythosaur.
And then she's like,
Mythosaurus? Mythosaur.
She doesn't bring it up ever again. She's like, oh, yeah, I didn't see anything either.
Yeah.
Yeah, Din's like what? She's like, oh, nothing.
Anything.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
He's like, no, it was dark.
We should probably go before it eats us. What? Nothing.
Nothing.
I was not surprised, though, that she didn't say she saw the mythosaur, because Din would have just hopped right back in that water like a little explorer boy.
Yeah, but I think the reason she didn't say anything is because she wants to tame the mythosaur for herself.
Interesting theory.
Because she wants the Darksaber so she could rule Mandalore. But
she's like, Din already has a Darksaber, not the mythosaur.
Because we already established that the first Mandalore became the Mandalore.
Right.
By taming the mythosaur.
Correct.
So...
If she can have the Darksaber,
Oingo
by hell I'm
boingo.
gonna have...
Could you imagine her riding the mythosaur while holding the darksaber?
It could
into
happen.
battle?
I don't think it's gonna happen. But
I mean, that's
cool.
like the intention. That's like the
On top of a space whale through
On top of
hyperspace.
so a mythosaur riding
No,
a
I
Purrgil.
think she's going to be hunting Purrgil on the back of a mythosaur.
Mythosaur can't. I don't think they can.
Are you sure?
I said
I didn't know they could live underwater.
Well, I mean, that's true.
Right?
That's true. But
What if they also could go to hyperspace?
They've got very high lung capacity.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure
Yeah.
they do. He probably. And he's been under there for decades.
I mean, we're that like they're like a whale. Whales are big, so they can hold their breath for a long time. You know,
That's true. Okay, we're learning a lot about. Well, maybe we're not really learning about anything, mythosaur wise.
Hey.
But I just want to say, I think it is interesting that she doesn't say anything to Din about the mythosaur, and I'm gonna for now disagree with your theory
Really?
of why she wants to. I still think I don't think it's as to keep it away from Din. I just think she's still like, I feel like in this process of becoming a Mandalorian in a way, you know, like she went through the waters, and even though she's not purely subscribed to the ways of old Mandalore, I still think that seeing the mythosaur really is altering her whole outlook on what it is to be a Mandalore,
Sure.
not necessarily the fact that, well, actually, I want to tame this thing, but I can't have Din here.
I think
so. I don't think it's that. You could be right. I don't know.
I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think that there's a lot I want to unpack here with what you're
Definitely.
saying. Because I think ultimately she is not to jump too far ahead, but ultimately I don't think she's sticking with the covert or with the Children of the Watch.
Yeah, it's,
Right? I think ultimately her being there is more about her character development in finding a middle path, and in Din finding a middle path, more importantly, right? Because I think that as much as I dislike the Children of the Watch and think they're a cult, I do think that symbolism and the symbology associated with their traditions and their practices is important to what makes a Mandalorian a Mandalorian. I do think there are some things that they do that are good for Mandalorian culture, but I think overall it is negative for Mandalorian culture what they're doing, right? And detrimental and destructive and all these things, right?
it's not sustainable.
I think
a
it's
culture.
sustainable. I absolutely think it could be sustainable, but I just don't think it's healthy. Like
Okay,
in that it causes issues where you don't really have a well-rounded culture.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this insular culture that just it doesn't grow, but I don't think it shrinks, right? So I don't think I think the sustainability is there. I just don't think there's growth and expansion, and I don't think they can get to their old heights with
that way, yeah.
with the way.
Yeah.
And I don't think they got to the height that we saw them in, saw them during the Clone Wars with the way.
Right.
Granted, they also got to the height they were in the Clone Wars by rejecting everything that that made them Mandalorians, and I think that has its own issues associated with
Sure.
it.
Brandon.
I could speak on this for
Yeah,
10
yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
So if someone else got something, go for it.
Did you guys enjoy when Grogu tried to say "this is the way"? But it was just like a bunch
Yeah,
of like
I did.
Yeah,
noises.
exactly. You have to put on the subtitles. But he does say it.
I think I thought that was pretty cool. Like Din like kind of just like looks back. He's like, okay.
Yeah. So I think ultimately, right? Like,
Oh, that was it, Brandon?
Yeah, that was it.
that was it. I think ultimately Bo is has a sense of reverence and awe for Din's treatment of Mandalorian culture, and clearly the fact that Din does, even though her experience with the culture and his experience with the culture are so different and so polar opposite, she does see that, hey, this is someone that like has immense respect and immense like reverence for the culture. Maybe there is something there that I can learn from it, because there is a power to that, right? But that doesn't mean she agrees with the covert or anything they're doing. And I think that if we see, I will say this now, I will be disappointed if in the end Din and Bo end up as part of the Children of the Watch following the way.
Yeah.
Because I so vehemently dislike it. I like it as a plot point for the show, and I like it as a fringe sect of Mandalorians. That if people do want to practice it and follow that, great. Like
right, but if you're saying like if this is how they decide to rewrite or not rewrite, but reboot the Mandalorian,
right? If the show decides to portray that as the proper path,
right,
I think that's so
misguided
and almost disrespectful to other Mandalorian setups we've had previously. Which, ironically, I think feeds in really well to the main thrust of this episode, which we'll get to. But before that, TIE Interceptors.
Yeah,
they're cool.
This whole fight, this whole sequence, this whole dogfight. I mean, I thought episode 1 dogfight was pretty sweet. This one blows it away in a great way. Mm-hmm. And I still love the season episode 1 dogfight that Din has. But this one is it's even better because it's Bo-Katan and Din teaming up against, I think there's like 6 TIE Interceptors they go up against.
I do wish that if we're seeing a Mandalorian dogfight, we're getting to see a Fang fighter.
Fang fighter.
The Fen Rao flies.
Oh,
the protector of Concord Dawn.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I can't picture his ship right now.
It looks just like the Gauntlet, but the size of the N1.
Oh, okay.
They're the Mandalorian.
Gotcha.
I thought that was pretty cool in Bo-Katan's like ship, like the flaps like went in reverse.
The sick drift.
How, like, she, like, turned around.
It was like a Maverick move where you pull, hits the brakes.
They even open up with an air stall. What movie is that from?
Batman.
Is that Batman?
Yeah, when he goes up into the moon.
I mean, it's done in a bunch of things.
It's
It's
one of those
actual
classic type of aerial combat type of.
It was cool.
Moves.
I was like, damn, I wish I wasn't watching this in my car. But this is sick.
Yeah.
Dude, I was listening to like full blast. And
you know what kills me? You know what kills me
sound.
about the air stall? It shouldn't work on a spaceship.
No, but I mean, I wouldn't
that
classify it as a stall. It's a stall type.
It also
maneuver.
didn't make sense when like the ship goes into like 0G for a second, like R5 like starts to float.
Yeah.
I'm like, shouldn't the ship have like artificial gravity?
Yeah, but
on
it's not. Yes, but it can be switched on and off. So it's not necessarily switched on when they're in Atmo.
It knows when it needs.
It's
to be
on auto.
It knows when it needs to be on, man.
Yeah, because if you switch it on when you're in Atmo, then you've just got 2 sets of gravity working on you, and wouldn't that be bad? I don't know how that works.
I don't know. I don't know how this technology works.
Okay.
Man.
Well, I also want to say that the dynamic in which Bo and Din play off one another and aid one another it was really fun to watch, and also Din just dropping out of the ship, which I think is going to kind of, it doesn't foreshadow, but we've seen it in trailers where you have a bunch of Mandalorians
dropping out of the ships.
doing one of those drops.
Pretty cool.
And so just to see Din do it once looked cool as hell. To see later on, whatever episode it's going to be, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 Mandalorians dropping onto Navarro, presumably, is going to be really, really cool. The TIE Fighters stuff is the fact that they mention it as TIE Fighter, the fact that
TIE Interceptors.
I'm sorry, TIE Interceptor, right? The fact
Which
that
has never been said on screen.
Never been said. The fact that Bo-Katan points out, interesting for a warlord to have so many, and I was like, oh, that's no warlord. That's no warlord.
That's a Grand Admiral.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I think this sequence did, as well as the episode as a whole, which we'll get into the core of the episode, no pun intended, with Coruscant. Brandon,
yes.
How was it on your phone?
It was great. I mean, the whole episode or just the fight scene?
We're talking about the fight sequence, yeah.
Yeah, the fight sequence was awesome. That was like movie quality, if you ask me.
It was definitely movie quality.
For sure. I was like, damn, I want to see like a Star Wars movie with action like this now.
Yeah.
I was very excited. I was very like, like that.
I want to know if it's Favreau or Filoni that has a hard-on for TIE bombers. Because we've had the 2 best TIE bomber shots in Star Wars have been in The Mandalorian.
I mean, I would argue. I mean, yeah,
there's a lot of TIE fighters in general in this episode.
There was, and I will say, I felt like the movements of the TIE Interceptors mirrored a lot of how they moved in Star Wars Rebels. Just the way they would sweep in and around, which was interesting because it's not directed by Filoni.
But I think that they're, I think Favreau and Filoni are doing a decent amount of work on.
I mean, they're
episode.
Producers and whatnot, so obviously they're gonna have some input for sure. But I did like just the way that they looked and the way they moved. I thought it was like because a lot of Rebels, you do see a lot of a lot of dogfights don't necessarily all take place in space, but within atmosphere. So it really did resemble that, which I really love because I really love Rebels, right, Brandon?
Rebels, great show. The Bendu, he's in the middle.
But I think keeping with Din and Bo, we could also just jump to the end of the episode.
No, I'd rather talk about Lost for 45 minutes.
Would you?
Yeah, let's talk about Star Trek for 45 minutes, and then come back to Din.
Okay, we can do that, but
it's a really great 45 minutes.
I agree.
I agree. But I think just to kind of tie up the Bo-Katan,
TIE Interceptor,
and Din storyline that's happening, because I was very curious how Bo-Katan and the Armorer were going to interact.
So before we get there,
I was kind of surprised, but
before we get there, Bo kind of volunteers herself to go with him, because even despite the fact that despite the fact that they had to, like, that Grogu and R5 were on the gauntlet. Despite that fact, she even says earlier, he said, I am redeemed, and she said, and I witnessed it.
Well, I think we also have to point to the fact that her castle got destroyed. We glossed over that. Her castle got destroyed by the TIE bombers, and that was hard to watch, because I was like, damn, I kind of like that.
I like the castle.
And now she really has nothing. She literally has nothing at this point. So she is,
except the way.
She is kind of a foundling now, in a sense, with the Children of the Watch.
Well, I don't think
I guess that's not true.
Foundling's not really the right word, but she is
a refugee of sorts.
She is a refugee. I think that's a good way of saying it, right? Like she is someone who is in need of a people or a something, because she has a goal. I don't want to say she doesn't have a goal. She has a goal in mind. Her goal is to restore and rule the Mandalorian people. And I don't think that's changed, right?
Right.
But I think that she needs something to remind her why she has that goal.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's what I was getting at with her watching Din go through the redemption process.
Totally.
I think it reminded her why she wants it.
100%. I think,
right?
Watching Din, the way he pays respect to the old ways and how he is so steadfast in those beliefs. Yeah, I think really has started to alter her frame of thinking of what it means to be oh my gosh. What it means to be a Mandalorian.
Hello, Felicus.
We've been too much Jar Jar going on earlier, so and that's why I think it's so interesting that now that she's with the Children of the Watch, and it's like, oops, I'm in a cult.
So they return to we don't know the name of that planet.
Yeah, I don't know the name.
And Paz kind of leads.
He looks pissed.
He looks pissed, and you know what?
It's the most words I ever heard him speak.
You know what?
I
at first I was like, does he have animosity with Bo-Katan? But he didn't even know who she was. He just knew she's a night owl.
And that she was not that she's a Kryze. What's the
no?
I mean, he does now know she's a Kryze.
Well, once she said her name, I think he knew who she was.
Yeah,
but I think that it was like, what do you want, night owl?
I would be hard pressed to think that no one there doesn't know who Bo-Katan is
by name, but not by
name. Yeah.
Because I would expect, because he's a Vizsla, I would expect he would have interacted in some way, shape, or form with her while she was a adherent of pre-Vizsla.
Yeah, what's the history between Clan Vizsla and Kryze? I feel like maybe there is. I don't know for sure if there is some sort of animosity, just because Kryze was with Death Watch, and that was Vizsla, right?
So,
and then she leaves Death Watch.
The Vizslas were Mandalore at one point. Mm-hmm. So Tar Vizsla, who forged the Darksaber, was the Mandalore.
Yeah,
right?
Lydia Tar Vizsla.
And there are several other Vizslas who were Mandalore.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, Clan Kryze became the Dukes of Mandalore. So I assume there is some form of animosity there.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? But with Bo-Katan in particular, who is a member of Death Watch, she kind of has her own thing going on there.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention she's they hold her responsible for the fall of Mandalore the way the Armorer does. Or that she was part of the reason why it fell, rather.
Yeah, I think she's part of the reason why it fell, but I also think she holds herself responsible for it.
Oh, for sure.
Even probably more so than the Mandalore does, than the Armor does, because I know the Armor does mention something about it last season.
Yeah, she does. She tells, because she's like, "How did you come across this Darksaber?" I think it was in.
Oh
Boba
no,
Fett.
it was in Boba Fett. Yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah, it was in the other show that had an episode completely unrelated to the rest of the episode.
Yeah, funny how that works. Anyways,
but so I like how she says like exactly who she is, and you could tell everyone they've got to wear the armor is so good at acting in the armor.
dude, I really want to point that out when they're in this the cave.
Sure,
because just the way they know how to tilt the helmet, the glances, the turn, like I'm like I can really feel like what's going on behind the helmet there.
Yeah, it's quite
you
impressive.
agree, Brandon?
Yeah.
You all right over there?
I need about 100 more milligrams of caffeine.
Dude, you want the
I got a good quarter in there.
I know.
Fucking chug it.
I just finished my
You got any Java juice?
I have, you know what?
out,
Hey,
fresh
I've got this imported monster. Do you want some of this?
Where's it imported from?
It's kind of not. It's pretend imported.
Pretend important.
Actually,
what?
no, it's made in it's made in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Oh, wow.
Oh, fancy. Fancy schmancy.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so they test the water by putting it in
The living water?
the basin.
Another water.
in more water, and it
Sure.
makes a swirly blue effect.
I was like, cool. Okay. I was like,
Yeah.
she could easily be like, you got this from Kamina.
Would have been pretty
Right.
Would have been pretty funny if she just like snorted it. Like, oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's the
That's
stuff.
She
good
just
stuff.
like got
That's
taller.
legit.
She got taller and just started growing. Like, yeah. All right, Din, thank you.
If the armor is the biggest Mandalorian, why does she simply not eat the other Mandalorians? Yeah, it's a cool thing, and she's like, okay, you've been redeemed, and then she says, and by creed,
and by creed.
so have you, Bo-Katan, and she goes, I don't follow the way,
Yeah, no.
and she's like, you bathed in the waters of Mandalore? She's like, yes. You haven't removed your helmet since then? Okay, you're right.
Oh my god, yeah, go
And then and she's like, well, then just stay here with us, and as long as you don't remove your helmet, you're fine. And you could leave whenever you want. But just stay with us.
Classic cult leader
Just,
line.
you know what? Just
Classic.
Just stay with us for a little bit.
You're not trapped here.
See how you like it. You're not trapped here. You can leave whenever you want.
But why would you want
But
to?
why would you want to?
Why would you want to?
I thought it was pretty funny how she accidentally bathed in the living waters.
Yeah.
Saving Din.
Yeah. I was like, she didn't really mean to do that.
Well,
she
and I
didn't even
like-
say the words. Like, come on.
I want to point something out too before we talk about the Bo-Katan stuff, because this episode really is the crux of it's about Bo-Katan, right?
There's not a whole lot
Of
that's
Din.
on screen, but there's a lot to talk about.
Right.
So
But I want to point out that Din was like, yes, I bathed in the living waters. I fell into the abyss. Right? It's
I
like
nearly
Hey
drowned.
Din, just don't say it.
Yeah.
Right? Like
so clumsy.
Like you don't have to go to like your cool mercenary crew and be like, yeah,
You saw the mythosaur because you're clumsy.
Yeah.
Yes, I might be saying that.
like maybe just leave that part out.
I did think it was interesting that based on our conversation last week, there was an explanation that there was that drop off did not exist
Yeah,
originally.
that's right, that's right.
But the bombs like opened it up.
Yeah.
And that's why
the mythosaur,
was able to-
home.
Because
Yeah.
the Mythosaur was probably
Deeper.
wherever deeper in
the
subterranean.
planet core.
Exactly.
Well, which we know in Star Wars, that's where the big fish
That's
are.
where the-
Yeah, and that's also the quickest way to anywhere.
right through
Yeah.
the core.
No,
that's
the
why I always
quickest
try
way to
dig
get to the
other
Naboo.
side of the world.
Yeah.
you know?
So if you go through the Mines of Mandalore, you get to the Naboo.
The Bo-Katan stuff though
Yeah.
is really really interesting. Because look, her people have abandoned her, right? And now she's with this other sect of Mandalorian.
Not-
We're all patting her on the back like, "Hey, glad you're here."
Not just abandoned her, but left her to go off to be marauders.
yeah,
Like-
mercenaries. So
Well,
like,
but the reason I choose the word marauders is because they're not doing. I don't think they're being honorable. I don't look at Costco Reeves and think that's one honorable lady, right? I think that bitch will slit your throat in your sleep, right?
Sure.
Like, so I because Casca and what was the other guy? Wolves,
yeah.
Or Wolfs.
It was Wolf.
Yeah,
Wolfie.
whatever that guy's name was. Like, they were like not good guys, because Bo-Katan ultimately is a bad person.
She's done bad things.
She's done a lot of bad things for a lot of selfish reasons.
Sure.
Right?
Doesn't make you necessarily a bad person, but it doesn't look great.
Which is ultimately what I was getting at earlier in my earlier tirade that I'm going to continue now.
Sure.
TIE Interceptor.
Tirade Interceptor. Thank you. Speaking of tirades, how about that tirade on whatever that planet was called? Anyways, so my earlier tirade, I think Bo needs this, right? Mm-hmm. I think whether or not she ends up as part of the covert of the Children of the Watch, I think she needs to be shown the way, in a manner of speaking, mm-hmm. in order to remind her what is good and true about the Mandalorian culture. Because if she is truly going to lead the Mandalorians into a new...
She's pulling a Billy Madison. She's going back to school, back to the roots.
Right.
She's back in first grade. This is how we used to do it. Live like your people of old.
But also so that she could learn to be better than them, right?
Sure.
Because ultimately, I think that's what Din and Bo have to do together, is they have to find a middle ground in order to create ironically, I'm going to use the word sustainable, even though I disagreed with it earlier, in order to create a sustainable life for the Mandalorians to rebuild Mandalore.
Yeah.
And something that can grow and build into something bigger and greater. Because the way that either side's been doing it will not work, right? Because the way that what we've seen, the remnants of her Mandalorians, or just normal Mandalorians, I guess, they're throughout the galaxy acting like marauders and mercenaries and what have you. Whereas we only have Din as frame of reference and what little we've seen of the covert, but they seem to be more willing to follow a code of honor and a code of ethics that the other Mandalorians don't seem to hold to as much. Because even Boba Fett references like, no, I am Mandalorian. I got this armor from my father, who got it from Jaster Muriel, on Concordia, right? Even though he spent the last fucking 20 years roaming about the galaxy disintegrating people.
Right. Being a bounty hunter.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. There's nothing, that's part of the code, but it's also that he does need to have a form of honor, which is what I think the Book of Boba Fett was about, was him finding that way forward with honor and his way of becoming a Mandalorian. I think that that's what we've seen with Cobb Vanth. I think Cobb Vanth, despite not being a Mandalorian, despite not currently having armor, and despite not, wanting to become a Mandalorian, he has slowly found a way to move forward with honor in the way that a Mandalorian will, right? All of these characters, for different reasons we've seen from season 1 to now, have grown and become better people through their interactions with Din, who follows the way in a form that befits someone to be upheld to an ideal, right? Because other Mandalorians wouldn't have done what Din has done with Grogu, right? Made a point to take Grogu in and not kill Grogu, despite the fact that that's what the contract wanted. And then when he found out what was wrong with Grogu, he said, you know what? I don't care that my contract says I should do this. What is right is for me to protect the child. Which translates to the way. The reason he took off his helmet is because that was what the right thing to do was, despite what the creed said. Yes, he's gone through the steps to redeem himself for that, but I don't think were he to go back and change things, I think he still would have taken off his helmet. Because that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So I just find it very interesting that I feel like every time we're introduced to another character wearing the armor in this show, whether it's Cobb, whether it's Bo-Katan, whether it's Boba, what have you, they've all grown in a very interesting way through their interactions with Din, almost more so than Din has. Because Din hasn't actually shown that much growth in this show.
Yeah, he is. There is a bit of him that's regressing, right? Especially in these first couple episodes, he's like, I got to become a Mandalorian again. I got to go in these waters, blah, blah, blah. And you're right, because he doesn't want to, he will take off the helmet, but he's like, I don't need to do that anymore because now I have Grogu and everything. That's all squared away. I did what I had to do, but now I need to go back and and reclaim my Mandalorian roots, if you will, and bathe in the waters and all this and that. It is going to be interesting, though, with Bo-Katan now in the covert, whether she wanted to be there or not. It's going to be interesting to see if she will have any influence over other members of the covert, not just Din. And then and I feel like Din's going to might choose between Bo-Katan and the armor, or I feel like it's going to start splitting somehow in the covert, or Bo-Katan's just going to be completely on the outside of things, and Din, who has a special affinity for Bo because he feels indebted to her because of this code of honor and ethics, right, that a Mandalorian has, especially that he follows. It's like, yeah, you saved me at least twice now. I'm forever in your debt. And so he's going to, I think, feel torn between Children of the Watch and Bo. And then, yeah, there's going to be a lot of, I think, soul searching in terms of why can't we find a compromise, a mixture of both, where it's for the betterment of our people, of our way of life. And if is taking off, like we talked about this before, is taking off the helmet really that bad of a thing when you're surrounded by
other Mandalorians, right?
Is like,
if you're in a place of safety and you're in a place of safety and you're among your clan,
yeah,
that's exactly when you should take off your helmet, because Bo
if
doesn't.
You're going to have this kind of rule, which
right.
I think is really silly to begin with,
because Bo doesn't take off her helmet when there's ever a threat to her. She only does it when
it's time to chill.
It's exactly
time to relax. And,
I want to do something a little different. I'm going to bring up a question from the viewers early,
okay,
because it's going to build off something you said. From Janine DeBean.
Heard of her?
I've heard of her as well. Do you think we'll see Bo-Katan face off against the armor?
Yes, I
Like,
do.
Do you think physically?
Like they're gonna swap
Yes.
faces, like
Okay.
in the movie Face Off?
Yeah, that's exactly what I
They're
think.
going to switch
Janine,
helmets.
Janine, well-known face-off stan.
Right.
I don't think they will physically. I think they will intellectually.
Troy.
And I think that's way more interesting to me.
Yes, but I also, I guess I selfishly want to see them physically. I could. Yes. Will there be some sort of confrontation between both? There almost has to be.
Right.
There almost has to be. Whether it's physical or intellectually, whether it's
Or romantic.
sure. That could happen.
This is the way.
This is
the way.
The way.
No, so I think if they do it physical, it will be. Oh God, Frank, no! If they have a physical confrontation, I think it will be done in a way that is like them arguing the ethics of culture while sword fighting.
Sure.
Right?
Like what's the protocol for? Hey, I want to run this clan. Can I challenge you for leadership?
Yeah, I think it's the same as having the Darksaber.
Right?
But here's the thing, right?
But I mean, I don't think Bo-Katan would want to do that. But
I don't either.
But it's like, like if
Well,
someone
I
sees
do.
like
Hold on.
Bo-Katan and the armor get in a fight, and then everyone witnesses Bo-Katan besting the armor, and people are like, "Well, I guess we had better fall Bo-Katan because it's the warrior culture."
Okay.
And
She goes, new rule,
and she
no
beat-
helmets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprise! No help. Well, here's the thing, is that was the problem. That's what went wrong with Death Watch, right? Because as soon as Pre Vizsla took over Mandalore, when he started changing the rules, that's when Darth Maul was able to come in and challenge.
Yeah, that's right.
And that led to the downfall of Mandalore.
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, before we move on, what's your answer? Do you think Bo-Katan and the armor are gonna come to blows, get a little fisticuffs?
Look at that.
I don't know. I feel like the armorer, like she has like a presence about her, like an arrogance, and like she thinks that she's too good for it, probably. You know what I mean? She's like, you are beneath me. I'm not even going to raise my voice at you. I'm just going to simply walk away.
I'm going to be condescending to a fault.
Yes.
I can see that.
So
that's how I think it's going to go down.
This is not a fan question. Maybe it is. I don't know, but I don't think it's a fan question. It's a question for me, though. We kind of have 4 potential leaders of the Children of the Watch.
Yes.
We have the armor, we have Paz Vizsla, and we have Din and Bo. And
Grogu.
I'm shocked that they're not following the storyline of Paz having resentment towards the armor or Din, because he clearly
Yeah, clearly follows the armor.
He clearly follows the armor, but there's been a lot of clear... every time we've seen him on screen when Din is involved, there's clearly, like, he does not like the way the armor is treating Din. Almost being too lenient with Din. Because what we saw in Book of Boba Fett, he outright confronts Din, right, for the Darksaber. And then when the armorer says, you're an apostate, and he's like, can I just kill the guy, please? You know? And then when he returns, he's pissed that he's back. And he's clearly calling the shots among the rank and file.
It does seem like
until
that, yes.
she steps out of the cave, right? And this does seem to be the way it's been since season 1, that he is this, like, iconoclast within the rest of the Children of the Watch.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the shot that we see of all the Mandalorians dropping out of the dropship on a Navarro, I think that's him leading his little coup d'etat.
I think that takes place over Navarro combating the pirates on Navarro. So.
I think you're probably right, but I hope.
I don't know, but why are we worried about pirates when there's like 50 TIE fighters blowing up Bo-Katan's castle?
You know what? That's a great question, Brandon.
It is great.
Let's talk about the Imperials.
Yeah.
So I thought, not to jump too far ahead, but I thought that the massive Imperial presence we see at Bo-Katan's house would pay off later on in the episode.
Nah.
No, when Pershing, right, Dr. Pershing,
Yeah.
right? He when he gets like arrested at the end, I was thinking for a second, I'm like, oh, is this gonna be like Imperials like kidnapping him and like bringing him to some like secret cloning facility, like clone Palpatine?
Yeah.
Or else.
Well, I think that's what he's been working towards, right?
Unbeknowingly, probably.
So the rest of the episode,
unbeknownst to him,
the rest of the episode, unbeknownst to us before today or yesterday, takes place on Coruscant. For God's sake,
it's one big city.
That's what I heard.
The entire planet is, in fact, one big city. We start off by looking at the opera house.
Yeah, his TED Talk.
I screamed when I saw the opera
Yeah.
house.
I was like, "Oh shit!"
I was in my car. I was in a CVS parking lot, and I went, "That's the opera house."
I was a little disappointed that Squid Lake wasn't playing, personally.
And it looked like they just took the shot right out of Revenge of the Sith.
Almost,
Kinda,
yeah.
And the shot of the stairs also.
Yeah.
It was like the identical camera angles.
Yeah.
I also want to say quickly
it.
about the look of Coruscant. It gives me real Return of the Jedi montage. Coruscant.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that.
That's how like the color palette, at least, of
Yeah.
the skyline felt to me, which makes sense if you're
For a second,
like a handful of
for a
years
second
post Return of the Jedi.
when they showed the like tallest like natural mountain,
The mountain,
peak, I was
yeah.
like, is that gonna be like the head of the Palpatine statue? Like when I
Oh my
first
gosh,
saw it.
that'd have been funny.
But but I do think that was interesting though that they've built so much city on top of the planet. That's the only like natural part of the planet that sticks out.
That's still there, and even still, that's not even the highest point on the planet at this point
It's
anymore.
the highest natural point. And you can't touch it.
It was interesting to start with like a Dr. Pershing TED Talk at the Opera House of like cloning this. We were trying to do this and take this, make it into this, and you're like, oh, like Palpatine.
I thought he was gonna turn out to like be evil and have like an ulterior motive. Like that's what I was thinking.
Well, I think he is. I don't think he's not. I think
I don't think so.
I never pigeonholed him as like some nefarious doctor. Like
I think
like
by the end of the episode, I think he really means what he says. I think he wants to continue his research to help people.
Sure, but his research is inherently immoral.
in the hands of the wrong people. Yes.
No, I think period, because he even says at some point, but you don't understand what it means for me to.
I mean, yes, it goes to the whole argument of could and should, right?
Yeah,
And he says the New Republic would never allow it because it's unethical.
Because
The ethics are complicated.
Yeah.
Is what he said.
right, because I believe in order to research it and do it, you have to cause a lot of death.
And there's ethically,
So there are a lot of
research,
ethical issues to get to the point where his research is a viable thing to do, right? So we see him giving this speech at Squid Lake.
It's a TED Talk.
TED Talk. And then we encounter these Imperials who are glorifying him these
Coruscantians?
Coruscanti nobility who are glorifying him for being a fucking Imperial scientist. It's so wonderful to have your work here. You know, I can never tell the difference between Rebel and Empire.
These people are front runners.
Like,
they're front runners.
Well, okay.
They were there when the Empire had control. They're probably like, oh yeah, Empire, hell yeah. New Republic, oh yeah, hell yeah.
They're so rich it doesn't matter who's in charge.
Does not matter to them. Exactly.
So do we want to talk about how this builds? I don't know where to start with this because I have so many thoughts on this episode.
Okay, so
and I know we all do.
So let's see if I can lay it out. So we have Imperials that are post-Empire life Imperials. You have the ethics of cloning and what that could mean for leading into the sequel trilogy. You have this undercover agent Elia. What's her name?
Elia Kane.
Man, she
is
sucks,
she working for Gideon or is it really for Thrawn? Who is she actually working for?
I loved her.
She was great in this
She's
episode.
great.
I don't like what she did to my boy.
Your boy?
Yeah, my boy.
You realize your boy is part of the reason that Grogu was kidnapped, right?
Yeah, but he won me over. I too like the yellow treats.
I think talking about Imperials post-Empire is interesting that they have this amnesty program, rehabilitation program, and that Pershing, like, I don't even, it's sort of like it seems like reconditioning someone's thought process and how they operate as human beings. And this is all under the purview of the New Republic, which
should
is
just thrown them all in prison.
Which is a whole nother thing, right? I mean, yeah, are they or are they not war criminals? Like,
yeah. Wait, so like, what's her name? The Kane lady?
Yeah,
Elia Kane.
Elia Kane. So she, like, basically like told the New Republic that like that she and Dr. Pershing were out in this.
So she's part of apparently another program that's looking for other Imperials in this amnesty program that are defaulting back to their empire-ish ways. And it, to me, so when she first shows up, I was like, sus, immediately.
Right.
Did not trust her from the jump.
Well, she had a look.
Did.
Well, because she was watching the TED Talk.
Yes.
She looks evil, no offense.
But
and it does seem like there is a specific
she's only played villain. Isn't she in Quantumania playing a villain?
I have not seen Quantumania yet.
I haven't either, but I looked her up and she's in Quantumania.
There does seem to be some sort of mission that she is on that is her target
separate.
is Pershing, and it's to get rid of whatever he knows.
Sure.
For fear that it could leak into the New Republic hands and therefore compromise whatever project Gideon/Thrawn is working on.
So this is kind of why
Palpatine, right?
This is kind of why I said I don't know where we want to start.
Yeah, there's
right?
it really is.
Because I want to talk about Bloodlines in order to talk about this. Did you read Bloodlines?
Not all the way.
I don't know how to read.
Great. Okay.
What does your shirt say?
My shirt says
Jabba the Hutt's
Dex's
Cantina?
Diner, Jawa Juice. This is a Brian Ward original.
Hell yeah.
I know Brian Ward doesn't watch our show.
Big fan. Future friend of the show.
We retweet his stuff all the time.
I know.
And,
it
doesn't work.
Doesn't even watch our show.
Work.
Guys, tweet at Brian Ward. Ask why he doesn't watch our show.
Yeah,
no, I'm kidding. I don't know. Maybe he does. It'd be
Do
funny if I'm saying this and he
right.
watches the show.
Okay, we said at the same time.
What was that?
We said at the same time.
I say too much. I'm trying to make a better effort.
It's a bad
to say
habit.
it
We
less.
shouldn't do it. It's not professional.
I agree. Oh, you know what? Brian Ward just tweeted me saying, "Of course I watch your show."
We've been doing this live the whole time.
Yeah, it is directly to him.
No, because
only.
Frank's internet
Only directly
actually
to him.
Frank's internet actually just went out while I was trying to look something up.
Did it really?
Yeah.
How about that?
He almost
That's
did it
Spectrum
again.
for you. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, they just texted Jill's at Disneyland. She just texted me Crystal Skull.
Oh,
Thanks
cool.
for the invite, Jill.
Anyways, so because the one thing we learned that's pretty vital about this is we learn what Pershing's research was. And it is basically gene splicing two individuals to take their best traits.
Right.
Which supports the theory that's always been there that the whole point was they're trying to learn how to clone force sensitives or clone force sensitivity into someone.
Yeah.
Right?
So Palpatine, obviously, he had to jump into a clone right away when he fell down in that reactor shaft, right?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Was his spirit just flying around like a ghoul?
That's what happened in Legends.
Interesting. Because I thought it immediately went into a clone body on Exegol.
Possibly. I think that's the most likely answer.
So, like, how premature is this clone body? Is it not force sensitive? Can he not use the force at this point? Is he, like, So he's like alive, but he can't use the Force?
I think he's alive and has some minor ability to use the Force, but not a refined control over it.
Yeah, I can't. Right? I'm not even gonna venture a guess of
what
right.
It is,
and this
is the thing. Like that's a whole other discussion.
It just seems really you can go every which way with it, and I'm not even sure the folks at Lucasfilm have decided
have an answer
how to get there. But they certainly didn't when they made the movies. I'll tell you that. But
I did think it was interesting that she would want to wipe Pershing's mind because I thought they would abduct him to like force him to do more research.
But here's the thing: I think they have his. Okay, so this is where I'm saying the issue is I don't know where to start.
And she took the lab equipment as if like the lab equipment was more important than his brain.
Right, but I think we're going to talk about all that in a minute.
Next week.
No, in a minute, because I think there's so much more to talk about Coruscant and the New Republic and where we're at.
They do say they say New Republic a lot in this
really
episode.
Do.
They do.
Like every other sentence.
Well, part of that,
Republic,
I think part of that
Republic.
is because the sequel trilogy literally has none of the New Republic.
Yeah.
And then they often refer to it as just the Republic, which could be confusing to the casual viewer.
I don't know. I think it shouldn't be. I think it makes fucking sense. It's the Republic.
It had been around long enough where they were able to drop the new. It's cleaner.
So what I want to talk about is we were talking about the Coruscanti nobility, and I want to bring up in Bloodlines that in Bloodlines and Aftermath, we established that Coruscant is sort of it's the red state of Star Wars.
Isn't that a Kevin Smith movie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, but
go on. Just don't let him distract you. Don't fall into his sorcerer's ways.
It's the red state of Star Wars in that like they are filled with former Imperials and people that almost like what the Imperials stood for to an extent. So in Aftermath, we find out that they are harboring Mas Amedda. Or they were harboring Mas Amedda for a little bit, for some amount of time. And then he went on the run. And then in Bloodlines, we find out that the centrists... So by the time of Bloodlines, which is 7 years prior to The Force Awakens, we find out that there are two political parties. There's the populists, which is Leia and Mon Mothma, and the centrists, which are represented mostly by a character named Ransom Casterfo, or Casterfo, depending on who you ask. The centrists believe in a strong centralized government with a strong centralized military. And the populists believe in demilitarization. And seeing as Mon Mothma has been the predominant candidate since the rise of the New Republic, that's what happens. And they allude to that in this episode.
Yeah, they do.
And the game Star Wars Squadrons, the campaign is all about the Republic demilitarizing and about them scrapping Empire Star Destroyers to build the Starhawks. And both Aftermath and Bloodlines, Aftermath and Squadrons. Thank you, Brian. Aftermath and Squadrons both emphasize what's the difference between a Starhawk and a Star Destroyer. Nothing. It's the same parts. You put them in a different configuration. It's still a fucking Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, there's this whole idea that is so well built upon.
It's the difference between a bad guy with a Star Destroyer and a good guy with a Star Destroyer.
How do you stop? Well, I made that joke before the episode. Because what we see in this episode is that the New Republic is taking these ex-Imperials, putting them in basically a compound or a ghetto, by the strictest definition of ghetto, and giving them numbers, and they're not sharing their names. They're not talking about their names.
That was a really interesting part.
Because they've all been lobotomized, is my theory. They've all gone through the mind flare.
They've gone through some kind of reconfiguration.
But I've been through it myself, and it made me feel a lot better.
Listen here, son. This ain't like the old mind flayers.
So the New Republic on Coruscant, at least, is enacting the same strategies that the Empire did. The only difference, and they bring it up when they're having the drinks in the courtyard, they say, well, it's a little weird that they're letting us live because we would have just killed them.
Yeah.
Well, sure, but you've all been lobotomized and brainwashed and given a number. So we're seeing the flaws of the New Republic. And I think this is where this does such a good job to me of building up the sequel trilogy and where the New Republic failed and why the Resistance exists. Because the sequel trilogy still never said why the Resistance existed. If you have the New Republic, why do you need the Resistance, right?
Yeah.
Because the New Republic doesn't have a military.
I understand that. And I actually understand the exact reason the Resistance exists.
But see, like, the Resistance is like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping ass wound.
But what I'm saying is, like, I understand why the two things exist because I've read all the shit and played all the games and all this stuff, right? But the general audience is going to watch The Mandalorian and the movies, and that's it, right?
Sure.
Oh, I mean, they'll watch The Mandalorian, the movies, Obi-Wan, Andor, whatever. You know, fucking whatever. They'll watch the live action
Stuff that's on your television.
They're not going to rewatch. They're not going to read the books and play the games. Some of them will play the games. Guess what? Shockingly few people do. Right? I know a lot of people who bought Squadrons or bought Battlefront 2 and never played through the campaigns of them.
That's bonkers to me.
Right. Because
they're like, those
they're like, I'll get to it eventually. I bought it on sale for $20. I'll get to it eventually.
I bought it to play the campaigns.
I know. So did I.
Hey, I'm not good at multiplayer, so I'm like,
I bought it to shoot stormtroopers in the face.
Hell yeah.
What about the fact that you play a stormtrooper most of that game?
well,
I wouldn't know. I only play online.
You still shoot stormtroopers.
Yeah, you do.
Just kidding. I don't play at all.
No, but see, I think the other
I did once upon a time
point
ago.
of discussion is when the Empire falls, you have all these formerly oppressed people now put into positions of power, finding themselves in position of power when they've been perpetually oppressed their entire lives. How do they then rise to the challenge of making a better galaxy? Because that's what they were fighting for this whole time, right? Because the Empire was so oppressive and it was squashing your freedoms, taking away your freedoms, killing you. Even so when you see now this beginnings of the New Republic and the tactics that they're not really that much different than the Empire, it is very disheartening to see that you were once oppressed and now you are performing along the same lines as your former oppressors, and you're doing the same things. You're not actually bettering the galaxy in the way that you thought you would, you could.
I think
and this is also pointed out.
I think they're bettering it, but by such a slim margin where it doesn't matter.
Exactly, and that's brought up before in previous seasons of Mandalorian when I forget the pilot's name at this point now.
Carson Teva.
He's like, and he's talking with I think Grief or even Cara Dune at some point, and it's like, you guys look at Grief is like, you guys aren't doing any good. Just leave us alone. We'll handle it.
Right.
We'll handle it out here. We're doing fine. And so
that's why Grief's trying to hire a marshal, right?
Right.
So he can take care of his own people.
And it's interesting to see what's happening here with the early stages of the New Republic. It's a bummer, but it does make sense to how and to where we end up when we get to the sequel trilogy. So it does make sense to me. Yeah,
Brando, what do you got?
Yeah, the galaxy is still a rough place to live. It's just that it's like now you have freedom, right? You don't have to worry about a tyrannical government telling you how to live your life, but at the same time, they don't have the resources to actually do anything to help you.
I mean, I'll tell you what, living in America as an American with freedom, and definitely not a totalitarian fascist government, I can't imagine what it's like living in a government that says you have freedom and then doesn't treat you like it. I can't imagine.
You're gonna get us removed.
Our forefathers fought for us to make this podcast, Sean.
Here's my point, right? I think this episode is so fucking prescient. Like, it is so relevant to the way we live our society, where we're all online. We've all got social medias. We all have a number assigned to us in some way, shape, or form, right? Everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone's got a social security number. You've got your driver's license numbers, right? The government doesn't care what your fucking name is. They care what your number is.
And if I'm paying taxes.
They care if you pay your taxes. And we even see, like, they go through the point. This is Operation.
And they expect me to figure it out? What the?
Like, this episode is about Operation Paperclip to an extent.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Definitely.
Like, this whole idea of taking ex-fascist scientists and people that were officers, part of the military, because a bunch of those people were, I think all of them were officers. And like this whole idea of taking these people and then now using them for your government, right? Because essentially, unlike Operation Paperclip, in this episode, they're not using them for big science projects. They're using them for menial, clerical.
Which, by the way, did you notice the data discs are the same one they used in Rogue One
Yeah,
for the Death Star?
I have.
I was like,
it took
me like 12 hours of like, where is this from?
I physically have one.
Oh, do you really?
And I meant to bring it, and I
cool.
totally forgot until you just said that.
Nice.
But the one I have, it has Arabesh on the top and bottom. It has Carrie's birth and death.
Oh, date of birth and date of death. Damn, that's
so.
fucking, that's, wow.
Guy,
I believe someone decided to make that.
Well, they made it like.
I mean, it's nice. It's nice, but it's like someone was at a marketing meeting, be like, we could sell.
No. It was someone. It was someone in the Mandalorian Mercs. In the costume club.
Okay, I was like, if this is like
Hasbro. Well, because he had had sold.
Man.
He had when Rogue One came out, he was selling them like the data disc. It's basically a laser etched, piece of acrylic, and he was.
It's a nice.
He was selling those, and then when she passed away, he started making them that had her life dates, and then it says Hope at the bottom in Arabesh.
Oh wow!
So
that is nice.
That is nice. Just an interesting little thing I have. But
well, there's definitely a lot of like parallels in this to like a post World War II United States, right? Like as you were talking about, and so it's interesting to see. It's like, okay, like the New Republic, kind of like what we see here in America. It's like you have your freedom, it's like we're not the Nazis, we're not the Empire, but at the same time, it's like we really only care about like heightening our power, right? Like, because after World War II was when the United States really became like a huge superpower, and we kind of like maybe see that a little bit with the New Republic, where there's like, okay, like we are now in charge and we like having our power, and it's just an interesting like dynamic there with like the morality and like the ethics of it all.
It is interesting because in regards to the U.S. post World War II, U.S. became a superpower in the world, but they didn't govern the world, but we were so massively influential on the rest of the world that we didn't have to we weren't telling France what to do. Yeah. I mean, I don't think so, at least.
Yeah, the only thing is the United States did not.
We kind of were.
I mean, right. But it's not
States,
like
we started the UN. No one else. We started NATO. No one else. Like,
but at the same time,
we did not demilitarize like the New Republic.
Yes,
no,
we did the complete opposite. In fact, we ramped up militarization in this country.
But you know what, Frank? That's a great point. But what if we had more tanks?
Yes.
When the Force Awakens showed up, the New Republic wished they had tanks.
And just like the Empire, we also built a ton of super weapons.
I mean, look, it ain't. Yeah.
I just think, and I think a lot of this, but I still think a lot of this episode is so relevant to today, even right? Like, we live in a society that is free, and this is true, and especially as Americans, right? Like, our whole concept of the phrase of freedom, like, it doesn't mean anything. We have it better than some countries, but like, so do a lot of like Canada, Canada and England and Australia, like. There's a ton of countries that have it almost the same as us, but guess what? In some areas they have it better, and in some areas they have it worse.
Sure.
And it's just a matter of like,
it's all different degrees of the same thing.
I feel like what this episode kind of demonstrated was like, hey, maybe like a centralized place of government that governs
too many people.
That wants to control everyone under this one umbrella of governing, like, almost just doesn't work. That you should just sometimes. I know I'm making a speech between the separation of like federal government and state government and small government.
But that's what I'm. So that's exactly
like a really interesting mind exercise to go through, and I'm getting it because of Star Wars. That's what. This what happens.
That's what I got. That's what I was getting at with bringing up Bloodlines. Because Bloodlines, that's exactly what that's about. It is about states' rights versus federal rights.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever. That's exactly what it's about. And I think that this episode is such an interesting display of that at a micro level for Dr. Pershing and what Dr. Pershing's going through.
I mean, because it's like when you're in episode 1, right? The Phantom Menace, you have the governors of your planet, and you have the centers that represent your planet, and they all go to this one spot, kind of like the UN, and like they all, it's I don't know that like
or like the U.S. Senate.
Sure, it's just I don't know. I'm trying to really figure out
Rationalize
what makes sense within the Star Wars universe if like Coruscant or whether it ends up being Hosnian Prime and whatever. Like, should there just be one spot where everyone goes and it's like...
to be fair...
Or is it you just like, hey, let me make a deal with... Naboo makes a deal with Tatooine, and Tatooine has a deal with...
To be fair, I will say, the New Republic did solve that issue by having a rotating capital.
Oh, right. Okay,
so
that's right.
That's one of the reasons why Hosnian Prime is the capital at that time, is because it's their turn to be capital. Chandrilla was the capital during Bloodlines. As far as I'm aware, Coruscant has not been the capital during the time of the New Republic.
Too many bad memes.
Moving the capital around is kind of dumb to me.
Well, it's got its own.
Like,
it's got its own set of problems, but it avoids what we see in Andor with what's his Perrin, right? Where Perrin and Mon Mothma are Chandrillan,
right?
But they haven't really been back to Chandrilla,
right?
Right? They're not really representing their people because they're Coruscant citizens now, because they're career politicians. It's kind of the we see that in, again, not to keep equating to America, but in America, a lot of our representatives, our state representatives, barely spend time in our state because they're in Washington D.C.
Yeah, we always make
right.
Yeah.
So by having that moving capital, you avoid that by saying
no. It just means you're on different planets, just never your
and
own.
That's
kind of it's the same but different
fine.
problem.
That's fine, but it's not giving one planet an inordinate amount of power. By making Coruscant the capital, you make Coruscant the most powerful planet in the galaxy, right?
And it's the head of government. It's like, wow, that's why you have all those rich people that are like, we don't know the difference between the Republic and the Empire. We're still eating caviar every night.
Exactly.
That's my kid.
Because those because those people don't leave Coruscant except for to go to Glianselm or some other.
Let's get back on track though with the episode, because I know we can extrapolate. We've been going pretty long.
Glow in the dark ice cream, crazy times.
Okay, I do want to talk about Monument Plaza.
Yeah.
So Monument Plaza, the reason you said this episode reminds you of Return of the Jedi is because Monument Plaza is where they tore down the monument in Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
We also see it in...
I also meant like an aesthetic way.
Right,
but
I know.
Yeah.
But that is where we see it in the first... In Light of the Jedi, the first TIE Republic novel. We see it in Clone Wars. We see it in Rebels, I think, at some point. It's in a ton of different mediums, right? And it's also old school Macquarie concept art.
Yeah.
Which shout out to Saul who brought that up in the Discord. I caught that. I already knew that as well, but he brought it up
Saul.
on. No,
it's smart guy.
Saul,
Sean caught it first. All right, man.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just pointing out. Saul literally can cite the Bible of Macquarie artwork to you if you want.
That's great.
It's a great old school Macquarie art piece that's based on.
Pictures worth 1,000 words. That'll take them a while to recite.
1,000 words is not that long, dude.
Yeah.
We've said like 17,000.
Well, you've been counting, really?
Yeah.
Someone in the comments write how many words we've said.
No one will do.
But yeah, and then the other thing, the March of the Resistance track from the sequels is playing over Monument Plaza.
It's like a whimsical
version.
fanfare.
Circus.
Which Brandon, you remember from Rebels, we heard the same thing with the Imperial March.
Right?
Yeah, I love Rebels.
Yeah.
It's funny because that means that music is in universe.
Yeah, well, and that's where I think that's why I think it is the Resistance theme is because they're fighting for the ethics and the values of the New Republic.
The Imperial March play in Solo also?
I think you're right.
Yeah, but after
in universe.
But they use the track from Rebels.
I've heard of Rebels.
Yeah.
They rebel.
The other part of music was when Pershing is like psyching himself up to be like, it's for the science, it's the knowledge, it's what the New Republic needs. I'm helping the New Republic.
That's what I say right before I record a TikTok.
It's for science.
It's for science.
It's for science. It's for the good of TikTok.
This is what America needs.
This is what TikTok needs. It'll unite the Chinese
Yeah,
and the American government.
They play the that dark atmospheric track from
I was
I think it's episode 4 of last season or something when we see the cloning tubes on Navarro.
Yes. I'm like, man, that's it's all leading. It has to be leading to Palpatine.
Yeah,
like it's just.
Do you think we see him in this show?
No.
Palpatine? No, absolutely not.
No.
No.
I thought maybe he'd show up like,
Dr. Pershing, thank you for doing my research. Look at my bone fingers.
He has recordings and whatnot.
Yeah, I think if we see him, we'll see it.
Because even Operation Cinder,
I think we'll see it in the way we see it in Battlefront
Yeah.
with the monitors or the
droid,
sentinels,
or like
whatever
the-
they
yeah,
are.
whatever you wanna call it,
because
yeah.
like so, and I'm like, what if we see like a Thrawn or like a Moff Gideon go to Exegol at one point?
I don't think
I actually
so.
think we're going to
No?
see Thrawn at the end.
Well, hold on.
Of this
I
series
agree,
now,
but I don't think
at
he's
this
going to
point,
interact
but-
with Palpatine.
Why
I
not?
think if we see Thrawn, he'll be his own man at this point. He'll be fighting for his own values. Now, whether or not there are ties to the First
'Cause-
Order within his organization,
I think
that's
so.
another conversation. So, which brings us to a great discussion of Elia Kane.
Yes.
Because we've seen her before. This
What
is not
a
her
doo-doo
first.
head.
This is not her first appearance in
Correct.
The Mandalorian. She was in
Gideon's ship.
On Gideon's ship last season.
Communications officer. She introduces herself to.
Walked by Pershing a bunch of times, never said hi.
Wow, what a dick.
Yeah.
But
now I
anyways,
am.
she
It's like.
she is working for someone Imperial
Yes,
I feel like it's Thrawn.
because ultimately
Gideon.
she is.
I don't think it's Gideon.
because they
It
kind
could
of just
be the First Order.
She does look like First Order material.
And
I'm not gonna lie.
this is I'm gonna throw my theory out
maybe
here.
Gideon is First Order. That's why he wants Grogu.
I don't think so. I think Gideon is after his own goals. I think Thrawn is after his own goals. I think she's First Order. And the reason is because I think she's trying to protect that. I think the First Order is, and by the First Order I mean Palpatine ultimately, right?
Sure.
I think the First Order was trying to use Gideon and Gideon's operations to learn what they need to know for their First Order purposes, for cloning Palpatine ultimately, right?
Yes.
But I don't think Gideon is involved in that because Gideon was too much he was too about himself. He was too just about aggrandizing himself and like, I have the fucking Darksaber and here's my army of Dark Troopers and all these things that don't
Troopers.
Dark Troopers.
There's so many layers to this, right? Because
There
like if
is.
what you're saying is true, it's
very
like
fun.
you have Moff Gideon, right? And then like there's someone like Thrawn who's like over him, right?
Yes.
But I don't think
Or maybe they're equals but
I don't-
separate.
I think they're
But then you have the First Order above all that. That's like, haha, like I'm the real like future of the Empire. But then there's an element to the First Order that is even a step higher than the First Order,
And it's the final- the final
yeah, and they're
order.
the ones that actually know that Palpatine is still alive.
the Sith Eternal, yeah.
Yeah, because the First Order doesn't know that.
Sure. Well, so and here's the other thing you have to understand about the First Order and about the Imperial Remnant during this time. The Imperial Remnant explicitly is a bunch of disconnected Imperial upstarts that are trying to build something out of the literal remnant, right? They don't want to answer to someone else because they all want to be the big head honcho. The First Order was a group of those factions that did band together under one leader and left, right?
I thought they were ones that got special invitations to the club.
Not quite. They were the ones that were willing to submit to Ray Sloan and the other guy whose name I can't remember.
Because I thought maybe they were
Gaius.
I thought maybe they were the ones that like Palpatine like sent like a secret message to, and he was like,
You guys are cool. Go to this part of the unknown regions and screw everybody else.
Well, there were why is your Palpatine half Trump?
well,
I have the biggest empire. You're gonna love it.
No, his Palpatine is Lego Palpatine.
Wait till you have the Coruscant taco bowls. They're the best taco bowls in the whole galaxy.
Here's after this episode and watching Elia Kane and everything she did. Here's how I view. Here's my theory on how it's all laid out in terms of hierarchy and blah blah blah. Elia Kane was working with Moff Gideon, right? Moff Gideon was tasked with overseeing the cloning operation and whatnot.
And you think
with Dr. Pershing and like all of that, that's why he wanted Grogu back, right? That's why the client wanted to get Grogu because he was working with Gideon, and I think Gideon is underneath Thrawn, and within Thrawn's control, he has designated Gideon. This is what you're doing for our larger scale operation, but this is the one part that I need you to work on. And now that Gideon was captured and probably has escaped, they
said that he basically escaped.
They basically said he escaped, right? But furthermore, I think once Gideon was taken into custody, Thrawn finds the remnants of Gideon's platoon or squad or whatever you want to call it, and there's a Elia Kane, and Thrawn's like, I need to make sure that all this cloning knowledge that this doctor has stays like no one can know about this.
Why
right?
wouldn't they want to utilize it though?
So
that's what
because they already have what they need to have the last time they got Grogu, and that's why Gideon was okay with Grogu.
And they've got
blah blah blah. Going off with Din. So hold on. So what is happening is Elia Kane's mission is to take out anybody who could have information on these cloning operations, because it would eventually lead back to Thrawn's mandate of resurrecting Palpatine, because he is very loyal to Palpatine. You see it in Rebels. Like, he's serving the Emperor.
What is Thrawn going to do to resurrect Palpatine? What does that even mean?
I think Thrawn's connected. I think Thrawn knows everything. Like, he's the other guy that knows everything. The Final Order, First Order.
He knows about Final Order.
I think he
everything.
does. I think he does. I think he'd be the only other guy that would know. Because Palpatine would need at least one.
Someone's got to know.
Someone has to. Like, he's got to have one point.
Like, how did he plant Snoke?
He is the point man.
You know what
Thrawn's
I mean?
the point man. And I think that's what all these other shows with Boba.
I don't think
Ahsoka.
so.
I do. I know you don't.
Because
but I
no.
Because that's my theory.
Because that's discounting the fact that Thrawn has his own goals with the Chiss Ascendancy, right?
Well, we don't know that that's true.
Yes, we do, from the Thrawn novels.
Well, do you think they're going to bring that into?
I don't think that they would ignore that outright when in both Legends and canon that's true, right? Because that's discounting a huge aspect of his character, right? He has his own goals.
I mean, you could have multiple goals. I mean, he could be hedging his bets.
I agree. I'm not trying to argue it. I'm not trying to argue necessarily. But what I also want to point out is I think you need to put all the pieces together, right? Because there is clearly, with the Bad Batch, we're clearly building off the Thrawn trilogy. And Filoni is, at the tippy top of both these two shows, right? And when I say the Thrawn trilogy, I mean the original Thrawn trilogy, the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Because Mount Tantus is where the Imperial cloning facilities were in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, which is Legends, right?
Right.
We see the scientists that are in Mount Tantus are wearing the Dr. Pershing uniform that we first meet him in season 1.
The Kaminoan stuff. Yeah.
So these two facts are definitely linked in some way, shape, or form, right? So Pershing was originally part of that Mount Tantus program with no question. My question is, does it make more sense for all of this to be I just don't think that with what we know about the state of the galaxy, it makes sense for Gideon to be openly operating and still being part of the First Order, right? Because
I don't think Gideon. I'm not saying Gideon's part of the First Order.
You're saying he just answers to the First Order.
I'm saying he just answers to Thrawn.
Okay. Who answers to the First Order? What I'm saying is, I don't think any of these people. I don't think that if they have ties to the First Order, they would be operating in the open, right? And even on the radar of the New Republic. I think the First Order is off the New Republic's radar until the...
I'm not saying the First Order exists at this point.
It does.
I'm not... Well,
we know it does.
The First Order at this point
exists.
In Mando?
Yes.
Do they call themselves the First Order?
Yes. As of the Aftermath trilogy, they are formed at the end of the Aftermath trilogy, which is a year after Return of the Jedi.
It's pretty quick.
Yes.
So then why do they still refer to as Imperials? In the show.
Because they're separate entities, is what I'm trying to say.
And they're hidden. They're in the unknown regions.
The First Order is fucked off somewhere
They haven't
else.
shown themselves yet.
The First Order is not. The First Order is purposely in hiding in the unknown regions until the time of Bloodlines, when they're ready to reveal themselves. And really, they weren't actually ready to reveal themselves. It was just Leia finally caught on to them.
Okay, I'm not saying the First Order is like operating. I'm just saying like Thrawn would be the guy who knows about the First Order. Not that Gideon knows about First Order. I'm just saying he answers to Thrawn. Thrawn could have, whoever else running around doing whatever he wants them to do, even though he knows the ultimate goal, or one of the goals, is that it's for the First Order to come back and have all this this massive presence whenever it happens at Bloodlines and whatnot. I'm not saying that like the First Order is openly like boom, out there.
But if
they've
got it, if they have Imperial Remnant on payroll and essentially doing their research and doing their bidding, and Gideon is part of the First Order, like that's an easy trail to follow back if that is linked, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, where my issue is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I don't think Gideon knows about the First Order.
Okay, but I also think we're going to get Thrawn as a big, open, operating part of this galaxy at some point, based on a few factors, right? Based on the fact that he was already brought up in an episode of Mando, based on we know he's probably going to show up in the Ahsoka show. We know that this Rangers of the New Republic show existed. So I think this is part of the puzzle that I think I'm seeing a little bit differently. Is I think we're going to see Thrawn operating in a similar fashion to what Gideon did, just on a bigger scale at some point in this live action TV universe, right? Because their whole point about Rangers of the New Republic and Ahsoka and Mando being on the air at the same time was that, hey, these shows are all going to come together and cross over and mix and mash, and Thrawn was set up to be sort of the villain with that. Well, if Thrawn has ties to the First Order or the Sith Eternal, that's too easy of a breadcrumb to be traced back to the First Order in some way, shape, or form. Because the First Order would rather have the galaxy be lulled into a sense of peace and lulled into a sense of security and demilitarize.
Sure.
Because the First Order knows that they're demilitarizing. If the First Order is then sending Imperial Remnant out into the galaxy, or sending
they're the distraction of like, hey, look over here.
But here's the thing: they wouldn't want that, because that is counter to them demilitarizing. If there is Imperial Remnant operating on a grander scale,
well, it seems like the New Republic was going to demilitarize, whether like they were like doing it almost immediately. Seems like.
So you think Kane is actual First Order?
I think that's a possibility. I don't think Kane is actually First Order. I mean, I'm not like 100% sold on it, but I think that it's possible that Kane is actually for actual First Order, and that might be one of the reasons she was on Gideon's ship was as a plant for the First Order. Not that Gideon was working for the First Order,
right?
But that Kane was a plant on Gideon's ship because Gideon was involved in the cloning. And I think most likely Gideon, to your point, Gideon was involved in the Mount Tannis stuff.
Sure, yeah.
In the first place, right? Which is
why
why
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I don't think necessarily that everyone involved in the Mount Tannis, or that Gideon traces back to the First Order in some way, shape, or form.
I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying,
well,
Thrawn is the only one out there
but
that
if you're saying
knows.
But if you're saying he traces back to Thrawn and then Thrawn traces back to the First Order, that would mean.
Wait, so you don't think Gideon answers to Thrawn?
No, I don't. Not necessarily.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's where we majorly disagree with.
At least I don't think that that's like absolutely true. I'm not going to be shocked if that's the case, but I'm not working under that assumption, right? Like, I'm not working under any assumptions aside from what we already know, I guess.
Which is not a lot.
Which is not. It's
not.
Admittedly,
we don't know.
It's not
really
a lot.
Anything.
It's not a lot.
Of just spitballing.
But here's the thing, Frank. It's not a lot in this show, but it's a lot between Aftermath, Bloodlines, Battlefront, Lost Stars. There's other things that all have pieces of this puzzle that all come together. The Resistance cartoon, right, has pieces of this puzzle. Bad Batch has pieces of this puzzle that aren't necessarily in this show with Gideon directly. And that's why I don't want to make a claim that, hey, Gideon or Thrawn are linked to the First Order. I'd rather talk about what we do have in this show and where the puzzle pieces come together with that, right? So to me, the puzzle pieces do come together that Gideon most likely was working on cloning for his own fucking reasons. The same reason he had Dark Troopers, right? He's trying to build up his own power base.
Dark Troopers.
Dark Troopers. Clone Troopers. Right? And that's, I think, my point, right? These Imperial Remnant, these Imperial Warlords are trying to build up their own power base. That's why they're Imperial Warlords and not Imperial officers, right? They're not part of the Empire anymore. They're not part of a bigger structure. They're their own independent operating forces.
And what I'm saying is, I think, Thrawn would want it to look that way.
But it also goes counter to the First Order's goals of having the Republic be lulled into a sense of security and be demilitarized. If Thrawn is knowledgeable about all these factors,
wouldn't Thrawn be like, I hope the New Republic is seeing these remnants of Imperials and then hunting them down, taking them out, and then once they think they're all gone, again, because that way it leaves us to do our thing over here, while they're over here thinking they're taking care of the rest of the Imperials.
But my
point, now the galaxy is free of the Imperials.
Frank makes a point.
I'm not saying that you're not, but what I'm saying is that's more speculation based off information we don't have.
Oh, sure.
Where my point is, I'm only trying to speculate off the information we do have.
Great. And that's fine. I'm just stating my theories.
Dude, do we have any more questions from today's episode?
I don't know.
We don't know.
Hold on.
So Moff Gideon escaped. Definitely. They do say that.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know if he did, but I'm like, the rumor has it. I'm like, he definitely escaped.
Well, he ain't in prison.
And if anything, that line is a point in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If Moff Gideon is missing, that's a point in your favor.
Do you think there are Imperial spies in the New Republic other than
Yes,
James?
Absolutely. I think more importantly, there's... Again, I
For
think
a second, I thought maybe all those officers that arrested Pershing were like secretly Imperial.
I was kind of thinking that too.
I did think
that for a second.
I did think that as when it first happened. That was my initial thought as well.
Because I feel like there's like a Shield Hydra thing going on. Right
well,
now. Like between New Republic and ex-Imperials,
all the New Republic uniforms are just Imperial uniforms dyed a different color.
Yeah. Just slapped a new.
Okay, so first question we have, which actually I was almost going to say let's save all of our questions for the next episode because the next episode.
Because we're already long here. So
we're already long here, and the next episode's going to be super short.
That's true.
So,
all right. Wait until Monday to get your question answered on Scoundrels, Inc.
Except Janine, she got the early treatment.
Except Janine, she got the early treatment.
I just want to clear this before we end, though. Okay. I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily.
I'm not disagreeing with you either.
But I just want to point out that based on the information we know, there's a lot of speculation and jumping there. And I subscribe so hard to the speculate responsibly thing of the... No, you're fine. And it's like we need to remember the pieces we already have in place because I think that we can't discount that. Now, what I was going to suggest before we got into that big thing,
whatever
was when this show's done,
Mandalorian or
no Scoundrels. No, I'm kidding. When this show's done, I want to talk about what's the pick. I want to map out the Empire and the First Order.
Okay.
Based on all available.
You want to speculate irresponsibly off air.
No. I want to speculate responsibly on air with all the facts. I'm going to make a chart with red thread.
Let me also say, like everything I said, if that doesn't come true, I'm not going to be like, Dave, John, why'd you ruin my life? I'm not. I'm just, from what I've watched.
Well, you should.
And from what I've watched and what I'm like taking away from maybe way too much from this episode, my brain really went into, I think maybe this thing could be this thing, and this thing could lead to that, blah, blah, blah. And like, sure, that could all 1,000% be wrong, and Sean could be 100% right, or we could all be wrong. I don't care. It's just fun for me to be like, oh, what if this is that?
I'm not. I guess my big thing. I'm not claiming right or wrong. I'm just claiming like
I'm not going to claim right or wrong either.
This is what I think the pieces that are present on the board lead to, right?
And I think I'm just taking it 17 steps further.
Yes, and that's I think that's what I was trying to say, and then you were defending your points. I'm like, wait, no, stop. Stop defending your points because you're making good points. Anyways, this is fun, but we're now an hour and a half into this fucking episode.
And people said this episode was going to be filler. This was filler stuff.
I do think it's filler. Hold on. Let me.
Misa no thinks so.
I'm gonna say this.
What I just said.
No, I said Misa no thinks so. But
I'm gonna say this because
it was nice.
For those that don't know, the reason Kevin's not on the show anymore
fired
is because we fired him for talking shit about filler episodes. This episode's 100% a filler episode, in a good way, right? This episode is filler.
Tread carefully, my friend. Tread carefully.
This
with
episode,
that word filler.
But my point is, filler episodes can be good, right? This episode is fillered with a ton of information, ton of great moments.
More of like a bottle episode than a filler episode.
I
This
don't.
is not
You know
a
what?
bottle
There was
episode.
not even a single bottle in this episode. Those little tab plastic cans they had weren't even bottles, bro.
Oh yeah, forgot.
Weren't even bottles,
I
bro.
think, can you get those at Galaxy's Edge? I think. Or like
No.
The
You know what
Coke-
they are?
The Coke ones, right? Is that what I'm thinking?
No,
of?
the Coke ones are bottles.
Yeah.
But you know what they are? They're the have you ever seen those buzz balls at the liquor store?
Yeah.
They're like plastic cans with the pulp. Yeah, that's what they are.
Okay.
They don't even have bottles in this, Brandon. Can't call it a bottle episode.
Our troopers.
Dark Troopers, Clone Troopers. Whenever we say Clone Troopers or Stormtroopers from now on, I expect that.
Yeah.
Stormtroopers.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's wrap it up. We'll see you all on Monday for our Bad Batch talk on Babu and the rest of the questions we got in our
Babu.
Discord. So make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss it, because who knows, we might get into some weird tangent argument of little fun thing over there as well. Who knows? We're all a bunch of scoundrels. We'll see you next time.
Scoundrel. Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.